morning. Good morning to all gathered here in the sanctuary and to those joining us online. Let's start today's service with a musical prelude by Catherine Tang.
My name is Lauren Duran, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm pleased to be leading service this morning with Reverend Tim Timerson, musical director Scott DeVoe, pianist Catherine Tang, and the UU Civil Choir. Whoever you are and wherever you have come from, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville welcomes you. We are delighted you have joined us this morning and are grateful to all who have made this moment of our gathering possible. I invite us to take a moment to greet others. Those online may unmute, and those here in the sanctuary or social hall are welcome to greet your neighbors, especially those you may not know. We offer a special welcome to newcomers and invite you to join us after the service in the social hall and to use one of our red mugs. UUCville members and friends are reminded to offer anyone with a red mug a warm welcome to our congregation. There's also a live stream of the service in the social hall. All are welcome in the sanctuary, but for those needing a roomier space, the social hall can be a good option. Those joining us on Zoom are invited to stay online for conversation following the service. Many thanks to all the people who make Sunday morning services possible, our greeters, ushers, hospitality, and altar decorating teams, and our wonderful religious education leaders and volunteers. And special thanks to our AV Tech team of Nash Ford and David Miller. And now we have greetings from board member Kim Grover.
Good morning. I'm Kim Grover. My pronouns are she, her, and I am on the Board of Trustees. And this morning, I want to talk about what you may have heard of as our campus plan. We've renamed it the Buildings and Grounds Plan. If you're not familiar with it, in 24, we worked on our long-range plan. We put a lot of work into that, and part of that was the idea that we need to make sure that we have all of our systems up and running and beautiful, and even do a little bit of dreaming about what we'd like to do. So now that campus plan task force has been created, and it consists of Haley Owens, Kay Frazier, Brett Gastinger. I know Kay's here. So I don't know if Haley and Breck are here, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And then if you have any questions, you can circle back with them or me. I think I'm well versed enough, I hope. So the goals of the Building and Grounds plan is to envision and develop a campus plan for the buildings and grounds that aligns with our UUCville mission, values, and guiding principles. Create a campus plan that inspires and engages the congregation in implementing the plan's priorities. So there's going to be 3 phases for that. The first one right now is just sort of gathering information. What's the state of our buildings and grounds? And fortunately, we have people lined up, and we're going to be working on that through the fall. And then in the early winter, January, February, that's when we start envisioning, what do we hope for our campus? And that's when you'll start to hear from members of the task force and other people as we get together in groups and throw out ideas. So be thinking about that. And then finally, in the spring, they'll bring that all together with a long-term, with a plan for the campus or for the buildings and grounds. So thank you in advance to Kay, Haley, and Breck, who have already done so much work in this department. And I'm super excited about what we have to look forward to.
Thank you, Kim. Here are this morning's announcements. The Breeze Church database rollout is continuing. Stop by the Breeze team table in the social hall after the service. Are you new to the UU congregation of Charlottesville? Join Reverend Tim and several lay leaders for our monthly newcomer circle today back here in the sanctuary at 12:15. Our pre-K English readiness class, taught in partnership with Sin Barreras, begins this Tuesday, October 14th at 10 a.m. And we need volunteers on Tuesday and Thursday mornings to staff the Edgewood Lane and Social Hall doors during the class. If you can help, please see Reverend Tim or email him at tim@uucharlottesville.org. Speaking of Sin Barreras, there will be a fundraiser called Bowls and Buñuelos here at UUCville on Saturday, October 25th from 2 to 4 p.m. Join us for delicious food and handmade pottery. All proceeds benefit Sin Barreras. The Mosaic Squad reminds you that there will be a second No Kings protest on Saturday, October 18th. We plan to carpool from the church. If you are interested in either driving or receiving a ride, please email mosaic@uucharlottesville.org or stop by the Take Action table in the social hall.
A lot going on around here. And by the way, that's probably like half of the requested announcements. So my goodness, there's so much happening. So friends, today we are gathering to both remember and I think to be inspired by the life of an amazing human being, the late Daniel Berrigan. He was a man of extraordinary faith and conscience and courage who dedicated his life to peace and to justice. So our call to worship this morning is taken from one of the most famous passages in the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament if you prefer, a passage from the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, that stood, I think, at much of the center of Daniel Berrigan's life and ministry. He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples.
They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks.
Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn, neither shall they study war anymore. Come, let us worship together.
As the rest of my family, the Durans, comes forward to light our flaming chalice, the symbol of our free faith, please join in saying our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. And then we'll do our hand motions. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church. the open mind. This is the church of loving hands. This is the church of loving hearts.
In the spirit of those opening words, I want to invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, which you'll be singing some of those words. Ain't gonna lay down my sword and shield. It's hymn number 162. This is a very famous African-American spiritual. It's really quite lovely. So please rise in body or spirit and let's join in singing, gonna lay down my sword and shield. Be seated. Wonderful. Thank you, choir. I think Scott put a little something extra in your cornflakes this morning. I don't know. Nice. You guys were on fire today. So we are now, Lauren and I want to share a story with all of you. It's adapted from Aesop's Fables. So before we do that, I wanted to invite any of our children, young at heart, come on down. Come and join us. This is a story about a lion and a mouse. A lion and a mouse. Come on down. Come on down. Awesome. There's plenty of room up here. Come on down. Wow, we got a nice big crowd today. It's very exciting. Right. Wonderful, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you. So Lauren and I are going to share the story with you, and we'll also have some slides on the screen to kind of go with it. So once upon a time, there was a lion who loved to do lots of fun things like playing in the grass, hanging out by his favorite tree, until one day he got a thorn in his paw. Ow! Lion said, and he began to cry. Now, Mouse was running through the grass looking for seeds when she heard Lion crying.
What's the matter, Lion?
I got a thorn in my paw. Ow, ow, ow.
I can help you.
You can't help me. You're too little.
I may be small, but I show up and I help out.
And then Mouse pulled the thorn right out of Lion's paw, but Lion had a small cut where the thorn used to be. Ow, ow, ow.
I'm sorry it hurts. Here, I have a Band-Aid for you.
That feels so much better. Thank you so much for your help, Mouse. Thanks for caring about me. The next day, Lion was again out playing and heard a tiny cry coming from a tree nearby.
Help!
It was Mouse, caught in a hunter's net and feeling scared. I am here, said Lion. I am big, and I show up, and I help out. And with one swipe of his big paw, Lion sliced a hole in the net and set Mouse free. There we go. Lion and Mouse then gave each other high fives and played together for the rest of the day in the forest. So that's our little story this morning. There they are playing together in the forest. So just curious, anybody want to make a comment about is there anything in particular you liked about this story? Yes. True. So there was a mouse in the story who just happened to have a Band-Aid on her, which is wonderful. I mean, some of us carry little first aid kits around, you know? Yes. The mouse was too huge? Oh. Yeah. Yeah, well,
The size of a dog should be.
okay. Sometimes the minister doesn't quite get the lessons he was hoping to hear, but yes, go ahead, Ethan. Well, actually, it's supposed to be their claws. They look like scissors. Well, that's because Reverend Tim only could find so many different images online. That's right. So yeah. So, well, you know what? Oh, go ahead, Meg. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that the mouse just saw somebody who needed help, even though you might think that that animal might be kind of scary because they're so big, but they helped out. Lenore.
Two. Like
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But easy for the lion to just go, my paw feels better. I'm good. I'm just going to go out and run around. But the lion responded too. Yes.
Something that I don't think is right is that the mouse usually finds actually and the mice.
So usually lions hunt mice, that's true, but maybe there are times when if each is in trouble, they might actually put all that aside and help each other. Frank.
I love how the mouse and the lion are so much like our church because
Uh-huh.
we show up and we take care of each other.
Nice. And yes, absolutely. And no, I did not arrange that with Frank ahead of time. But thank you so much, Frank. That's right. I have to say, that was one of my favorite parts of the story was the whole part about I show up. And why do I show up? Because somebody needs help. I don't ask who they are or how big or little they are. Somebody needs help, I show up. And that does remind me a lot of our church. So
One thing that
Yeah,
that
Lauren?
struck me is that we all have different gifts that we
Mhm.
bring. And so no matter if we're the mouse or the lion, we have different gifts that we offer. And all of us in community are important because of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for listening. And if you decide the lesson is that you should always carry a Band-Aid, that's not a bad idea. So, all right, so let's sing our children.
Piece, I did want to mention something important. You all are good singers. I can hear you out there. Okay, I'm not asking you to join the choir. What I am asking you to do on 2 Sundays from today, October 26th, which is our ancestor Sunday, I want some of you to show up for a pickup choir. We'll rehearse here at 10. It's a fairly simple piece that we're doing. And you will then be backed up by the choir who has been, can do the harmonies behind it. If you can do the harmonies, great, but all you need to do is to come and learn to sing a short piece. So that is, as I say, 2 Sundays from today, October 26th. We are interested in expanding our singing from the stuff that we rehearse to involving more of you. Because I know you sing, I know you can sing. And frankly, this is a community choir. We have people in here who are not the greatest singers, but they show up. And the point is that singing is great. Are they making? Yeah, all right, yeah. Fritz is making noises, yeah. No, honest to God, this is the thing. We have no auditions. We just want you to show up. But anyway, we want you to show up for this thing. This will be 2 Sundays from today. The piece that we're doing is a tribute to the Ukrainian people, written by the composer Joan Zimko. The words are very simple. They're in Ukrainian, but they're Mir Zaraz, which means peace now.
We are an interconnected community that cares for one another. Part of how we embody this care is by making time each week to share the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts. I will now share what was submitted earlier this week. In honor of all of our joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken, you are invited to come forward and place a glass stone in the communal bowl of water. Everyone is welcome to participate. Those online are invited to share their joys and sorrows in the chat. Please take a stone or stones from one of the baskets and come down the center or side aisles and make your way to the bowl of water on the table in front of the chancel. Patty Wallens from the pastoral care team will come forward to help hold the space. Patty will be available for a few minutes after the service in the back corner of the sanctuary if you are in need of support or just want someone to listen. Those online can contact the pastoral care team at pastoral.ucharlottesville.org. Let us begin. Our first reading is called The Price of Peace by Daniel Berrigan. Certainly, the trouble is not that we do not want peace. We have seen enough war and violence. We are sick of it unto death. But most of us do not want to pay the price of peace. We still dream of a peace that has no cost attached. We want peace, but we live content with poverty, injustice, and racism. We long for peace, but we wish also to keep undisturbed a social fabric of privilege. We cry, let us have peace, but at the same time, let us have normalcy. Let us lose nothing. Let our lives stand intact. Let us know neither prison nor ill repute. There is no peace because there are no peacemakers. One of the ways we show our care for one another is by sharing our financial gifts with our larger community and our congregation. Our social action collection for the month of October is for The Haven, which provides a place for anyone in a housing crisis can come to find support and resources they need to survive and exit their crisis. The Haven has been a longstanding partner of this congregation, and every week volunteers from UUCville serve lunch at The Haven. Nash, will you show the social action slide for those who would like to donate support to support the work of The Haven? In addition to giving online, if you would like to make a donation with cash or check, please use the social action collection envelopes here in the sanctuary. Please make checks out to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville and write Social Action Collection or The Haven in the memo line. We also invite you to support the ministries and mission of our congregation by using Venmo, the text address, or by visiting the church website. You may also place cash or checks in the collection plates as they are passed. Your financial pledges and gifts to UUCville enable our congregation to put love into action. Let us now dedicate all of the many gifts we share with one another by saying, "We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely and for the highest good."
Catherine, it's beautiful. Our second reading is also by Daniel Berrigan. And this is a reading, these are words that he wrote as he and 8 other nonviolent resistors were preparing to engage in an anti-war protest at the Selective Service Office in Catonsville, Maryland. Our apologies, good friends, for the fracture of good order, for the burning of paper instead of children. We could not, so help us God, do otherwise. We say, killing is disorder. Life and gentleness and community and unselfishness is the only order we recognize. For the sake of that order, we risk our liberty, our good name. The time is past when good men can remain silent, when obedience can segregate men from public risk, when the poor can die without defense. We ask our fellow Christians to consider in their hearts a question which has tortured us night and day since the war, meaning the war in Vietnam, began. How many must die before our voices are heard? How many must be tortured, dislocated, starved, maddened? How long must the world's resources be raped in the service of legalized murder? When, at what point will you say no to this war? We have chosen to say, with the gift of our liberty, and if necessary, our lives, the violence stops here. The death stops here. The suppression of the truth stops here. The war stops here. Daniel Berrigan. May the 17th, 1968. Daniel Berrigan, Jesuit priest, peace activist, poet, along with 8 fellow protesters, including his brother Philip, entered the Selective Service Office in Catonsville, Maryland, and removed 350 files. Catonsville, by the way, if you don't know, is a suburb of Baltimore. The files, which contain information about young men classified as 1A and deemed ready for service in the Vietnam War, are placed in a wire basket, taken outside to the parking lot, and ignited with napalm. Here's a picture. As flames rise up from the burning files, the 7 men and 2 women pray together for an end to the war. The 9 are arrested later that day and eventually put on trial. Their action, not surprisingly, generates national attention. Some admire their courage and conviction. Others criticize their reckless destruction of property. A few, not surprisingly, even consider them to be traitors, worthy, and I say not surprisingly, given some of the rhetoric we hear today, traitors worthy of the death penalty. Now, 8 of the 9 are convicted and sentenced to jail time. For a while, Daniel Berrigan somehow manages to avoid prison by going underground. He is eventually taken into custody by the FBI and serves 18 months. It is the first of many prison sentences Daniel will serve, and altogether he spends the equivalent of 7 years in jail for his nonviolent protests against war, the nuclear arms race, and other social injustices. Now, I have to confess that until I read his autobiography several years ago, I didn't know a whole lot about Daniel Berrigan. I knew that he had a younger brother, Philip. They were both priests who dedicated themselves to peace. And I had heard that they had engaged in some pretty militant, nonviolent direct action that involved such things as destroying public documents and breaking into weapons facilities and military bases in order to do symbolic damage to weapon systems, including famously nuclear warheads. But what I didn't know until I began reading and learning more about Daniel Berrigan's life is just how truly powerful and extraordinary his vision of peace and justice, faith and religion was. One can debate the effectiveness of the actions and tactics that he took, and we will look at those actions and tactics a little later. But what absolutely cannot be questioned, and what I want to focus much of our attention on this morning, is the depth of Daniel Berrigan's faith and courage in challenging a violent and unjust status quo. In simplest terms, Daniel Berrigan was a prophet who fearlessly and relentlessly spoke truth, a prophet whose willingness to risk his reputation and even his life stands as an example and a challenge to those committed to resistance, and especially, I would add, to many clergy who, like myself, talk a okay game about peace and justice, but who are more often than not unwilling, as Daniel Berrigan said in one of our readings, to pay the price for peace or to disturb the social fabric of privilege. So let me begin with just a little bit of background about Daniel Berrigan. He was born in the early 1920s. He was the fourth of 6 sons. At an early age, his family moved to a farm in upstate New York. He had a very difficult relationship with his father, who subjected the whole family, and especially Daniel's mother, to frequent bouts of anger and abuse. In both his autobiography and in his poetry, Daniel speaks honestly, painfully about his father, and wrote in one of his poems, "I wonder if I ever loved him, if he ever loved us, if he ever loved me." I don't think it's an exaggeration to suggest that Daniel's experience growing up with an abusive parent certainly helped define his life. Even as a child, he was angry at the local Catholic Church for seeming to condone his father's abusive behavior, rather than intervening to protect his mother. And this criticism of the church marked the beginning of a lifetime of challenging the complacency and the complicity of not only Catholicism, but of all organized religion in the face of violence and injustice. Now, in spite of his anger at the church, or maybe it was because of it, Daniel Berrigan decided to become a Catholic priest. He entered a Jesuit seminary in 1946, and was ordained into the priesthood a few years later. Berrigan taught school for most of the next decade and formed friendships that would have a lasting impact on his activism and his vision. And it was during this time that he made 2 especially important relationships in his life. The first was when he met Dorothy Day. There's a picture of Daniel and Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day, of course, was the founder of the Catholic worker movement and really one of the great witnesses and activists for peace and for combating poverty, really in this century and maybe of all time. She was really something. Day and the movement she founded, the Catholic worker movement, embodied a radical vision of Christianity and the church, a vision that put Jesus' commitment to peace and to ministering to the least of these at the center of religious and spiritual life. For Dorothy Day, faith was ultimately about accompaniment, not simply helping, but journeying alongside those who were struggling. Berrigan credited Dorothy Day with helping him to see the connection between war and poverty. As he once wrote, Dorothy had a basic hope that God had created the world with enough for everyone, but she also knew there was not enough for everyone and for making war. During the same period, Daniel Berrigan formed a deep friendship with the famed monk Thomas Merton. From his correspondence with Merton and his participation in extraordinary spiritual retreats that Merton used to host in the 1960s, Daniel Berrigan came to understand and appreciate the essential relationship between the inner spiritual life and the outer world of activism and protest. Those retreats also convinced Berrigan of the essential role of community in this struggle for justice. I think it's fair to say that Daniel Berrigan would have embraced some of my favorite words in Unitarian Universalism by my colleague, the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, who says, "Alone, our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Now, of all the people who helped Daniel Berrigan make the journey from priest to poet and radical peacemaker, none was more important than his younger brother, Philip. Philip Berrigan was also a priest, although he belonged to a different order than Daniel did. But that order, the Josephites, had a reputation for centering themselves, embedding themselves in oppressed communities. Philip was also greatly influenced by the reforms of Vatican II, and he channeled his energy into radical movements for peace and justice. And it was really Philip Berrigan who paved the way and provided the inspiration for Daniel's involvement that day in Catonsville, Maryland. About 6 months earlier, Philip and 3 other activists had done a kind of trial run by raiding a selective service office in the Baltimore area. They poured their own blood onto draft files. I heard somebody gasp a little. It's pretty dramatic, I agree. They poured their own blood onto these files to draw attention to the brutality of the Vietnam War and the injustice of a military draft that victimized the poor and the powerless while shielding the privileged. In the years leading up to the Catonsville action, Daniel was challenged and inspired by Philip's bold actions, and he increasingly began speaking out against the war. He helped found 2 important peace organizations, the Catholic Peace Fellowship and clergy and laity concerned with the war in Vietnam counted Dr. King among its members. In January of 1968, Daniel journeyed to North Vietnam to bring 3 captured American pilots home. During that journey, he was forced into a shelter with several North Vietnamese children as bombs rained down from American warplanes. I think it's fair to say that this experience gave Daniel a sense of how devastating and immoral U.S. policy had become, and it helped him make the decision in his own life to pay the price for peace. So when Philip approached Daniel about joining the protest at Catonsville, Daniel Berrigan was ready. He drafted, of course, that powerful public statement outlining the reasons for fracturing good order. Now, let me take a minute to say a word about the Berrigans' approach to peacemaking, more specifically to their willingness to engage in very, very dramatic acts of defiance and non-cooperation, and to even break the law and to destroy or deface property. It's important to note that even among their closest friends and supporters, there were very mixed feelings about their methods. For example, both Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton offered support for what Daniel and Philip were doing, but both privately expressed concerns that raiding an office and destroying property would be counterproductive and actually harm the peace movement. Those same doubts and concerns were voiced 12 years later when Philip and Daniel led a group of protesters into a General Electric weapons facility in Pennsylvania. The group took hammers to an unarmed Mark 12 nuclear warhead and covered it in their own blood. That action, not surprisingly, garnered a great deal of publicity and inspired a movement, the Plowshares movement, which I'm sure some of you are familiar, which is advocated on behalf of nuclear disarmament and against war. So here's a question. How does one measure the success of a nonviolent movement for social change? There are instances where success seems pretty clear, like the Civil Rights Movement, which inspired and led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Acts. Gandhi's nonviolent movement in India seems to be another example. But other movements and actions, such as those led by the Berrigans, are less clear-cut. The nonviolent protest in Catonsville did not end the Vietnam War, nor did the Plowshares protest at the GE plant lead to nuclear disarmament or an end to the arms race. But if one understands success as changing consciousness, as energizing others to action, and as leading key institutions like church to begin to change both their attitudes and actions, I think the Berrigan brothers had an enormous impact. In the wake of the Catonsville raid, some 70 other nonviolent actions were taken against Selective Service offices across the country, and those in other nonviolent actions, including a well-publicized burning of draft cards at perhaps the most historic of all Unitarian Universalist congregations in Boston, played an important role in delegitimizing the draft and turning public opinion against the war. Berrigan's activism and writing also posed a challenge to the complacency and complicity of the Catholic Church in perpetuating war. For much of his life, Daniel thundered against what he called the Me Too church, different meaning then, whose silence provided moral cover for a status quo of war and violence. Daniel also contrasted aggressively Jesus' message of peace and compassion with what he saw as the church's incomprehensible gospel, whose centerpiece was, in his words, to go along with what is already going on. And I think it's this stinging critique of not just the Catholic Church, but really of all faith traditions and communities that proclaim values like love of neighbor and justice and peace. It is this critique that I think stands as Daniel Berrigan's most important legacy. He saw violence and injustice as ultimately religious problems and as religious failures that must be addressed by people of faith. For Berrigan, you cannot call yourself a Catholic, a Christian, or really a person of any faith if you're not willing to put that faith into action by standing against the status quo and on the side of those who are victimized by violence and oppression. I want to take a moment to share with you a quote that I found of Berrigan's that is actually my favorite, a quote that employs some colorful and, may I say, unchurchly language, but which I think points to how Daniel lived his life and how we should understand what it means to be a person of faith. Faith, Daniel Berrigan said, is rarely where your head is at, nor is faith where your heart is at. Ultimately, faith is where your ass is at. Now, I don't normally use that kind of language, at least not in church. And if I was to translate Berrigan's definition into, say, more conventional UU language, I would say faith is about deeds rather than creeds. But I think I like Berrigan's words a lot more because every time I read them, they feel like a kick in my complacency. And they also remind me that the purpose of this church or any religious community is ultimately not to be polite or to go along for the sake of getting along. Rather, as Daniel Berrigan so powerfully reminded us through his life and words and activism, the purpose of any faith and any religious community is to do all we can to build a very different world than the one we are living in now. A world that embraces and embodies the values he fought for his entire life: love and justice, compassion and peace for all people, no matter who they are or where they come from. Of course, living this kind of faith takes courage, tenacity, and a willingness to sacrifice. As you can see from this final image of Daniel Berrigan being arrested as a rather elderly man, I hope we have that image. There it is. He never stopped. He never stopped working and never stopped taking risks for the sake of peace and justice. He was truly in the struggle for the long haul. And as I reflect on his life and what it can and should mean for our Unitarian Universalist faith and for this church community, I simply want to conclude by saying that I hope and pray that we will follow to the best of our ability in the footsteps of this amazing prophet. May we find the courage and the boldness to put our rear ends on the line and to oppose those voices and those forces that breed violence, hate, and the dominance of the few at the expense of the many. It is only when good people of faith and conscience rise up and say enough to war, enough to injustice, that things begin to change. That is what Daniel Berrigan's life teaches us, and to paraphrase his words that you heard earlier, there is no peace because there are no peacemakers. There's no justice because there are no justice makers. May we be the peacemakers, and may we be the justice makers. Amen, and blessed be. So I invite you now to rise in body or spirit. We are going to sing a beautiful song that's not in the hymnal, Let There Be Peace on Earth. So please rise. The lyrics will be on the screen. Please extinguish the chalice. I want to leave you this morning with some words from Daniel Berrigan's friend, Dorothy Day. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is one of those ripples. No one has a right to sit back and to let hopelessness take charge. There is simply too much work to do. Amen, friends. Go in peace.